if there are not enough hours for all of the things that you want to do, you need to find a way to make the most money possible in the hours that you are working so that you can hire people to do the things that you don't have time to get to. And every time I start to experience tiredness, a feeling of being overwhelmed, a feeling of being disengaged, I know it's time for me to hire something off of my plate. So every time I start to feel that little itch that says, I don't like what I'm doing, my life is not, it's not fulfilling, I don't enjoy this, somebody needs a job. And if you structure those jobs the right way, you make more profit. So in other words, every time I start to feel burnout, I make more profit.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Answering Legal's Everything Except the Law podcast. I am your host, Nick Werker. If this is your first time tuning in, this is the podcast where we share expert advice on all the parts of running a law firm that attorneys weren't exactly trained for back in law school. Now, our guest for today's episode is someone you'll want to listen to closely, as she's known as the law firm mentor. She's also the owner of 2 successful companies. She's the founder of the Williams Law Group and has a second business where she provides business coaching services for solo and small law firm attorneys. Her motto is never stop growing. And she's going to be sharing some of her best law firm growth tips on the show with us today. Allison Williams is here. Thank you so much for joining us, Allison.
Thanks for having me, Nick. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
As am I. Like I mentioned before, I heard you speak at a law firm boot camp, and I was captivated for your entire segment. It was like energizing. I was alone in a room, and it was just, well, you know, you get the whole chat and everybody's commenting and all that, but I found it like invigorating. So I understand that you took your practice, the Williams Law Group, from being a startup to a multi-million-dollar business in just 3.5 years. Can you take us through that journey a little bit? How you were able to achieve that level of success so quickly?
Yeah, so I would love to tell you that I had a brilliantly mapped out plan for what my law firm was going to be, but I didn't. I quit my job when I thought I could support myself on what I could produce. And then I went into the business of law and very quickly realized that knowing how to be a good lawyer has absolutely nothing to do with knowing how to run a business. And the business damn near killed me. Quite literally, I had started to work harder and harder to keep up with everything. Stupidly, did not hire anyone right away. And when I did hire people, I was very bad at it. So I survived my first few terminations and then finally said, I'll do this on my own, and became a secretary, a file clerk, a lawyer, and shoved all of those roles into about a 15-hour workday, 7 days a week, until I ultimately was so exhausted that I fell asleep driving home one night and almost died hitting a guardrail. So thankfully, it was a near miss, and it was kind of the wake-up call that I needed. And it happened early enough in the process that I was desperate to solve the problem, and very quickly realized that I couldn't do that on my own. So I started working with a series of business coaches and learning the pragmatics of business, learning how to integrate that, bringing in some of my own intuitive strengths in the areas of systems and organization and structure, and structured everything in my business, the marketing, the sales, the people, and very quickly was able to operationalize the growth of the business. And so putting intentionality behind that was really what got me into multi-million-dollar status very soon. And we've continued to grow since then.
Thank God you're okay. Thank God nothing bad happened and nobody was harmed. But that's a cautionary tale. I've worked that hard too. And I've been close to falling asleep. When I was a kid, my dad owned a warehouse. And for extra money, I was like 11 and 12. I would work a full day in the warehouse. And the way that he worked, I saw, was unsustainable. He used to pull over, and it used to drive me crazy because I was a kid. I wanted to get home to my friends, and he would have to pull off on the side of the highway, and we would take a nap in his car, which I guess is better than falling asleep at the wheel. But there's a better way to do things, and I love to hear that. It's not like, oh, I figured it all out myself. I did this. No, I got a bunch of business coaches. I got a bunch of advice. I got a bunch of help. I started hiring people. So speaking of that, what are some of the biggest mistakes that you see lawyers make during the early years of running their practice which are kind of likely to keep them from growing and are the unsustainable things that we're talking about?
Yeah. So, I mean, I love that the question about mistakes, because I kind of, I mastered in making mistakes when I first started my law firm.
Same.
So I made all of the biggies. So the first one is when I got to the point of saturation, I couldn't fit any more into my schedule, I didn't hire. That was the first very critical mistake. People never feel like they can afford to hire. I mean, and I never felt like I could afford to hire, even though I had plenty of money in the bank relative to the average law firm owner that started. I already had a statewide reputation when I went out into business on my own. And still there was the, oh my God, making payroll. What if I don't have enough? What if it doesn't come in? And I didn't hire. So I just worked harder and harder and harder. And at some point, there is a law of diminishing returns that we lawyers, we believe that we're superhuman and we'll just figure it out. And it never gets there. The second thing is that I didn't raise my prices soon enough. I've never quite understood how I missed this very easy seminal point, but it took the second business coach that I work with to say, hey, wait a minute, if you have too much work and you're not going to go hire someone, raise your prices, right? You're going to glut yourself out of the market for the people who are the lower hanging fruit, but the people who are willing to pay $350 an hour are willing to pay $400 an hour, are willing to pay $450 an hour. And it's all in how you package it. So I started raising my prices, and then I brought in more money while working fewer hours. And that gave me back some semblance of ability to manage it all. Third major mistake is I didn't really focus on a growth plan. I just kind of thought, I just need to make a little bit more, right? And more is not an attainable goal, right? Because as soon as you hit more, there's also typically an expense that is going to go with that more. So you don't usually net 100% of extra dollars. There's an expense. And if you're thinking about the expense and not the income, which is what most people focus on when they start in business, you're not going to be able to scale to the point where it's worth your while. So at some point you say, I don't want to work more hours for dollars. I'm just going to be fine where I am. And that mindset is very reductionist, because as you hire people, like even the time that we're in right now, we're dealing with massive inflation. Like people need to be able to support themselves. And if you start gutting wages or you start undercompensating people while you are growing for yourself, you're going to create resentment in your company. You're going to create turnover. And frankly, you're going to have people that are resentful to be at the workplace, which is not what you want either. So I very much had to learn how I had to keep growing, which is the reason why my motto is never stop growing. It isn't just so that you can make as much money as possible. It's so that you can create for others while you're creating for yourself. And that's what ultimately fuels the growth and the health of the company.
I think you bring up such an important point that undercompensating people can create resentment in the workplace. And if you're hiring somebody or paying them to represent your business or your firm or whatever we're talking about, and they're not compensated to at least a fair degree, they're not going to represent you the best way possible. They're not going to have the same confidence or the same, the same skin in the game that you have. So I like to hear that. But one of the biggest things that you assist other lawyers with is learning how to systemize their operations. In your opinion, why is it so vital for law firms to have proper systems in place for their firm? And how can lawyers start this process of systemizing?
Yeah. So systems are kind of what I like to consider the engine of your business, right? When you get into the car and you're trying to go somewhere, you need the engine to run without you having to think about it, right? You turn the car on, the engine runs. If every time you hit a stop sign, you have to question whether or not your engine is going to putter to a stop, you are not going to be able to freely move from place to place. You might get there, but you're going to get there with a lot of stress and a lot of frustration on the way. And the practice of law is already so overwhelming. It is so psychologically taxing. It requires a lot of our resources, our emotional resources, our physical resources, financial resources. You just can't afford, as a lawyer trying to do high elevated service to the bar and to your clients, you can't afford to have an engine that stops running or that you have to think about. So my goal is to really help lawyers understand how to systematize everything, not just how you answer the phones and how you process the mail, but everything from how you are generating money in the business. So you don't have to think about it. How you are getting work done in the business so you don't have to think about it. If a client calls my law firm and complains, because clients are clients, right? They're humans. No business is ever going to satisfy 100% of its people 100% of the time. But if a client calls and complains and says X did not happen, the very first thing that I question is whether or not that is a part of our system. And that tells me whether or not we have a systems problem or we have a people problem. And almost invariably, you start to solve for problems that have not even yet been brought to your attention when you systematize, because you systematize your way out of future problems. So you create a better work environment for your employees. They don't have a whole bunch of unhappy people calling all the time. You have clients that are more inclined to pay their bills on time because they don't feel like they're just a number or a widget in your company. And it tends to make a higher load of work more sustainable for people to handle, because you're not managing the stress of figuring out what's next. You're managing the workload, which means you can tend to get more productivity out of people. They can produce more income for your business. So your labor efficiency rate goes up. You're getting more efficient with the people that you're bringing in, and thus your cost for labor goes down. So in other words, if I'm paying someone $100,000 a year to be a lawyer in my law firm, that $100,000 is going to produce a certain amount of revenue. The more efficient that person is, the more revenue they can produce on the same hours, even though they're not costing me more money. So you're inherently making more money by virtue of having a highly systematized business. And when you have more money, you can do things such as employee improvement or employee morale boosting activities so people enjoy the workplace. You can also profit yourself, right? You are the owner. You are the person that took the greatest risk. You are entitled to receive the benefit of your labor. And ultimately, you create sustainability so that when things like COVID happen and the world shuts down, you have money in the bank and you're not hoping and praying that you don't go out of business because all of a sudden people aren't spending money. So it really just creates a better business all around for all people that encounter your business, including you.
I like the COVID point, especially because I agree with everything you're saying about having a system in place. And when you deal with things in that way, you sort of solve for future problems that come up, like you said. But I do want to talk about marketing, because marketing is always going to be part of the equation when it comes to growing a law firm, and never stop growing. Can you tell us a little bit about how your firm has approached marketing over the years, and if your approach has evolved at all as the years go on, or what's your favorite marketing strategies? I would love to hear it.
So, I mean, we're now in a day and age where I think there are so many different marketing strategies, and a one and done approach is never appropriate, nor is it required. So I like to tell people, most people that meet me are surprised to learn that I'm very much an introvert and that I don't like networking. I'm not a person that likes to go out to functions, to shake hands, to kiss babies, to meet people. And so for me, starting the process of marketing was really overwhelming. It was triggering. I always felt this question of, am I good enough? Or I don't like to be evaluated. What are people going to say about me? That was kind of always running the back of my mind. So I couldn't go out and do the traditional, go into a room and meet people at a bar function, right? There are some people that that's great for, wasn't for me. But one day someone invited me to speak on a panel and I found that I loved it. And you can now stick me on a stage in front of thousands of people and I light up, and that makes me happy, as opposed to the one-to-one networking. So you have to find what works for you. That's kind of the pole star of what I tell lawyers about marketing all the time. But there are some things that I think are necessary that even if you are not expert at it, you need to be doing it just to have a comprehensive marketing plan that has a lot of different funnels of marketing through which you are driving your leads. So that needs to include a digital marketing strategy. You need to have a company that is not just putting your website up and putting pretty pictures on it, but you need to have somebody monitoring what is the state of the art regarding the conversion touch points. Where should the call to action be on the web page? Should it float down as people are scrolling, or should it be stationary? What colors are most likely to keep eyes on screen longer? Those questions are expert questions. They are not dabbler questions. And when we start dabbling as lawyers trying to figure it out, we give ourselves a great disservice. You can actually make a lot more money a lot faster when you hire a fully competent digital marketing company to manage that. Together with that, of course, you need to be doing video. Now, The American attention span, the human attention span has really gone down a lot because of social media, but other strategies as well. So just putting up some stationary pictures, you're going to get more traction than flat words, but video is going to engage people more, and it's going to start to increase that relational point that ultimately gets people, especially when they are hiring a lawyer, to the point of saying, yeah, I trust that person. And there are a lot of people that feel very vulnerable when they're coming in talking about problems that are embarrassing to them, that are going to cost them money, that are going to be challenges for their life. You want to have a relationship where that person wants to connect with you sooner rather than later, from the moment they walk in. And if you've already created that relationship, it is much easier to get them over the finish line if they already feel they know you, and that happens through video. And then finally, what I always tell people is you can't do everything online. You do need to be doing some things in person. And there are strategies you can use to create relationships that will yield more relationships. So instead of networking being, I go to a party, I shake hands, I kiss babies, and I leave, or I hand out my proverbial business card or even my V card, now we're doing it electronically, you really should be thinking about how to create relationships with people that are most likely to be in front of the people that are most in need of your service. So who is the person that is best suited to you? Lawyers to other lawyers may be appropriate, but many times you need to go to ancillary professionals. You need to go to the mental health community. You need to go to financial professionals. You need to go to people completely outside of professional services. You need to go to contractors. You need to go to artists. You need to go to your local business people. But find those people and then create a win-win for them. What can you give them of value so that they will be more favorable towards you? And hunt for that person that is as entrepreneurial as you are, so that they don't just see a value in giving you referrals, but they actually will intentionally seek a way to do that.
I have nothing to add. That was so well said. The one thing that I never realized, though, that can be really intimidating for lawyers, because I'm not like you in the sense that I am extroverted, but I do need like that introvert's time to recharge. But I can go to an event and talk to people, and it doesn't like intimidate me. I can do that. I don't know if I would kiss babies. I don't know if people want me kissing their babies. I wouldn't blame them. But it can be intimidating to be, especially if you're the owner, and that's what we're talking about here. It can be intimidating to be the face of a company. So finding that niche of what works for you, like you're an introvert, but you speak in front of thousands of people. I find that inspiring, but also really like interesting that you figured that out about yourself, that like, oh, I don't want to go to the networking event because I don't like one-on-one, but I can still talk and light up a room in front of thousands or hundreds or more. We will be right back after this short ad.
Who doesn't want to be a successful attorney with a busy practice but still have that life? Having those lunch breaks, playing golf, going on vacation. Answering Legal allows you to. My name is Laura Pfeiffer Battaloro. I'm an attorney, founding member of the Battaloro Law Group. Our headquarters is in Brooklyn, but we represent people all over the state of New York. The process of getting started with Answering Legal couldn't have been easier. It was so seamless. They're so efficient. The message will pop up on my phone. It'll pop up in my email. Answering Legal allows me to have a personal life, a more balanced life, and it also helps me to be a better attorney. It saves time. It helps you grow your practice without you even realizing it. Getting started with Answering Legal, it's the best thing that we've ever done. It pays off in spades. It's been amazing. I couldn't live without them, really.
When prospective clients come to a law firm and they're deciding whether or not to hire a lawyer, maybe they have a couple of different options, maybe they've spoke to a few different people. What do they care about most when deciding whether or not to hire a lawyer?
So most people would be surprised by this. It's interesting because you said kind of they're choosing between different options. One of the things I should note is that I have actually a non-attorney who sales in my law firm. So the people that come into my law firm, they're coming for the brand. They're not coming for a particular lawyer. Sometimes they are referred to lawyers on my team. Sometimes they're referred to me, but ultimately they will always go through our salesperson. And what people don't realize that they're looking for, they will tell you, I'm looking for how I feel with the lawyer. I'm looking for whether I think the lawyer can help me. Do they have a good strategy? They'll say that. But the reality is, people make decisions from their emotions and they justify them with their logic. And that is the human experience that is not unique to non-attorneys. So one of the things that lawyers love to believe is that they are the most rational humans on earth, and that if they just have the right data, they can make the decision. But the reality is, we all make decisions because we feel that in hiring someone or buying something, we are going to feel better at the end of that transaction than we feel in this moment, right? That's why we choose a Tesla over a Honda. That's why we choose a red outfit over a blue. That's why we choose the person that we married over someone else. Every choice that we make is driven by how we think that choice will make us feel. So really, when you have a legal consultation or a sales conversation in a law firm, what you're trying to get at is what that person needs to feel in order to choose you. And that is about asking the right questions. That is not about data dumping as much law as you can on them, or saying, hey, I know the judge, or I know the statute, or hey, the law is about to change on this, that, or the other thing. Lawyers know the law. Most people intellectually understand that, and most of them will presume that you know the legal answer. Right? They're not looking for the best legal answer. They're looking to feel a certain way. And that usually means that they want to feel like they can hand their problem over to you and that you can solve it. And that comes usually in the awareness of you asking the right questions in the right way that's guiding them down a pathway of decision to get to the point of clarity. When you do that for a person, when you ask them astute questions that help to shed a light on the nature of their problem, how big it is, the necessity of solving it imminently, you help that person to see that you are a resource for them, that you are the resource for them. And so what I teach lawyers when we talk about sales is that it really is that if you learn how to sell, then it doesn't matter what they're looking for. They're always going to find it in you, because you will learn how to ask the right questions. They will connect with you in the process, and they will get to yes. And the more people you can guide to yes that are your people, the better ultimate relationship they're going to have. And then they will send more people without you having to go on expensive campaigns, spend money on marketing, buy more pay-per-click ads or anything else. It will naturally grow your business.
You talked about sales, which I think a lot of lawyers see as a dirty word and think of it as like trickery. Some people think of sales as a dishonest way to get somebody to buy something from you, and it's just not true. Right. Sales is not only necessary, but I guess the word is necessary. It's necessary because, like what you said, people make decisions with their emotions, but they justify with logic. You'd be doing somebody a disservice if you weren't trying to sell them on your ability to help them, right? If you're not actively convincing them with trust or value or an offer or something like that, they're not going to get the help that they need from your firm. And if you believe that you're the best person to help, you should be trying to sell that person. I would never, if somebody called me for help, I would never say like, you make a decision. Here's this X, Y, and Z. No, I'm going to tell them what I can do for them. I can tell them how I can help. And that's because I care about people. If I didn't care, I wouldn't try to sell them. And so I never understood this whole, listen, I guess maybe there are some salesmen out there who have given the term sales a bad name. But it's not a bad practice. I do it because I care. If I didn't care and I didn't want to help you, I wouldn't try.
Well, that's the crazy thing. Like people assume that you are convincing a person. Here's the thing. I mean, I think about it like the career choice. Like people ask me, like, when did you decide to become a lawyer? And it was like, oh, well, I had this experience in American history class. I went through the experience. I enjoyed it. I thought, oh, I would be good at this. I'll do this, right? No one had to convince me. But if you were to sit me down and say, at that point in my life, when I was at decision, hey, what are the things that you enjoy? What would you have chosen to do with your life? I might have chosen a different career path, right? Because there are things that are in lawyering that I was drawn to. You could have never convinced me to have been a brain surgeon. Like Nothing that you could have said, nothing, no information that you could give me, no shiny lights, no questions would ever lead me down that path. Not because there's something wrong with that path, but because I'm not predisposed to it. So one of the things that I always tell people is like, you're not convincing. Like, you think that you're convincing because you believe in your own supremacy. There's a certain level of egotism that goes into the idea that you can convince someone to choose you. All that is really happening is that something in them has already been favorably disposed to you, and something that you said stumbled upon it, right? When you are in a legal consultation, you're stumbling upon what they want to hear by virtue of, you're telling them an anecdote or an example of how you help someone, and they wanted to hear the positive outcome on the other side. That's what they needed, right? You didn't know that. You guessed at it. And here's the thing, if you think about it, that's actually more manipulative, because in that point, you're basically throwing anything out and seeing what sticks to try to convince a person to hire you, versus coming from truth, where you're really trying to guide that person in the role that you actually are suited to, guiding the person. That's what they're hiring you for. They're hiring you for counsel, right? You're actually doing something intentional. And there's nothing manipulative about that. The manipulation is if you pretend like you don't care if they hire you. I mean, I will tell people in a heartbeat, like I've had a prospect say to me before, well, you're just in this to try to get my money. And I said, well, damn right I am. Like, I don't do this for free. Why are we acting like that's a surprise? Like, you're not coming to a public service agency. And they were very surprised by the answer. And I said, well, listen, there's a lawyer out there that's probably going to lie to you and say, I don't care if you give me your money. I'm not going to lie to you. I'm going to tell you this is a win-win. Now, ethically, if I did not believe I could get you the win on your side, I would not offer you the win on my side. I wouldn't offer to take your money and not provide a service to you. But if I believe in my service, and I do, and I believe I can help you, and I do, I believe that that is worth something of economic value. And you should also see that there's a value there. If you don't see it, I'm not going to force you to see it, but I'm not going to act like I don't see it, because it makes you feel better. And when you have that kind of conversation, people are like, here's my check. Thank you for helping me. Because you're being real.
Yeah. And I like your perspective, and here's why. You give people a lot of credit. I think a lot of lawyers are so scared. Oh, like, I must be so much smarter than the person who comes into my law firm because I can solve this problem. They can't, and I can't sell them on my solution because that would be manipulation. Give them the credit. They came to you for knowledge. You're presenting them with a solution. Let them be smart enough to figure out that you're the right person for the job. There's nothing wrong with that,
If you believe you're the right person for the job,
exactly.
Why not say that?
And I'm a big believer that no person is any better or worse than anybody else. We're all equal. Some people have different skills, and that's what makes us all useful, right? Like, somebody comes into your law firm and pays you for a legal solution, but I walk into a pizzeria and I pay somebody for pizza because I'm a terrible cook. So it's just, we all have different value, and that's okay. I do want to move on. I want to ask you about a recent episode of your podcast, which is called Crushing Chaos. That will be linked in the description. We encourage all the listeners to go check that out when this is finished, because Allison Williams is amazing. But you broke down the topic of batching law firm content. Can you tell us a little bit about what you mean by batching, why it's a valuable strategy for lawyers to be engaging in? And also, do you have sort of any pointers for making batching easier?
Yeah. So batching really just means that you're going to create a massive amount of content all at once. So instead of today I write a blog post, tomorrow I send an email, the next day I post a graphic on social media, you're going to create your content in a way that you can mass produce it and get a large volume of it created at once. And the value of that is really that as a lawyer, especially if you own a law firm, you are going to be busy, right? You're going to have things that are high priorities. And it's almost always, for a lawyer, going to instinctually feel like your highest and best use is serving your clients. That is not, by the way, always true. But in the moment, it's going to feel like Susie is calling, Susie's going to fire me, Susie's going to file a grievance, Susie's going to sue me for malpractice if I don't respond to this email asking what time she has court tomorrow. So you're going to urgently go do that thing. And there's always going to be things vying for your attention. If you block out a scheduled amount of time that is just dedicated to creating the content, you are more likely to get it done, and you're more likely to create enough of it that you can start to see traction off of your marketing efforts. And part of the reason why lawyers don't actually write the blog post or write the email or create the graphic is that the one thing that you do this week that you don't get around to processing until next week, that you don't get around to posting somewhere until the next week, doesn't get you anywhere. So you see it as futile. But when you create in mass, you actually get more bang for your time buck. So I highly recommend that people do it. And the easiest way to do it is really to just put a time on your schedule. I always tell people, if it's not on the calendar, it doesn't get done. So put it on the calendar and then create sacrosanct space around it. That means if you have a secretary or you have a virtual admin, or even if you have an offsite phone service company, turn off the phones, tell everyone you're unavailable, and make sure that that time is protected. And then you need to create a content strategy. And the content strategy, there's lots of different ways to look up how to create content, but basically you can take one idea and create it for a multitude of platforms, right? So you can write one article, break that down into several 2-paragraph blog posts. You can take that same content, change the word slightly, and post it on social media. You can take that same content that you posted on social media and repurpose it into a different take on that same article for the next weeks and the next weeks and the next weeks. But when you do that, like at a few hours at a clip, you're more likely to get more content created and use it more effectively.
I love the idea that if it's not on the calendar, it doesn't get done. Because it's very true of my time. If I don't have it on the calendar, I don't want to do it. And for some reason, when you act in that way, it's really intentional. I was just talking to a guy who his main, I don't know what to call it. I guess his main vocation is like time management for attorneys. And he inspired me to put things on my calendar, but to be even more intentional about it, to block out the time. Because I used to just put an event on the calendar and I didn't care how long it lasted. But now I'm much more intentional with my time. And this idea of batching, listen, I work in marketing. So what you're saying is very true of how I practice my content. We just call it a campaign. We'll come up with a content campaign. It's centered around a particular subject. So say I'm going after, I don't know, bilingual answering service for attorneys. I want to have a whole campaign centered around people who are looking for a Spanish and English answering service. Well, I'll come up with several blog posts. One is about the benefits. One is about how we actually answer the phones in Spanish. One is about how the back end system works to make sure that the calls that you route to us actually get answered in Spanish and nobody has to wait. And then I come up with the social media and the emails and I delegate that out to my team. It all comes back. We read it. And then it's like what you said, it just makes my life so much easier. I can post it all. It in that way, it also gets more traction because it's thematic. So I want to cover one more important topic because we love covering this on the show. You've covered this, is dealing with burnout. I'm sure a lot of work has gone into your practice over the years, and you have 2 businesses. So I'm sure that has been a lot of work. I'm curious, has burnout ever been an issue for you? And is there anything in particular that you do to combat it?
Yeah. So it's interesting. I'm glad that you mentioned that particular episode of the podcast, because one of the things that anyone that's heard me speak for any length of time knows is that I have a history. I went through a very, very severe depression at one point in my life. And that really was kind of the epicenter, the far extreme of burnout, because it started at some point and I didn't take care of it. So it just got progressively worse until it was a full-on depression. But so there are several things that I tell lawyers that are promoting their ultimate mental well-being and then ultimately their mental health that you have to do in order to sustain yourself as a business owner, really in any area, but in particular in a law firm. So you have to be intentional about taking care of yourself. And taking care of yourself not just means your physical health, it also means your mental, your emotional health. And that means putting things on the calendar that are for you. The same way that you schedule court, you need to schedule vacation, you need to schedule time off. And one of the wellness practices that a therapist taught me that I still live by is you need to schedule fun in your calendar. Now that might seem a little nonsensical, right? If you're a law firm owner that's married with kids, you might say, well, I've got, the kids play date next weekend and we're going to have fun at Disney on our vacation or whatever. But you need to actually put things on your calendar to look forward to. Because if you are just in a state of working and you're in a state of overwhelm and you don't have that thing that can pull you out of the weeds of the moment of whatever you're dealing with to look ahead, what tends to happen is we focus on the problems, right? Our instinctual wiring is to solve problems. And so you're in a constant state of solving problems. And then by the time you get to the thing, you are so tired and so worn out that the thing is not exciting to you anymore. But being intentional about looking forward to something actually lifts your mood. It tends to make you less experience. You have less experience of stress. And overall, you tend to be happier in the course of your work week, in the course of your work day. The other thing that's a real big component of combating burnout is making sure that you are strategically systematizing your life and not just your business. So when we talk about systematizing your life, that means that you need to figure out how much time you are going to work, how much time you're going to be with your family, how much time you are going to sleep, and fit in the things that matter. And that means if there are not enough hours for all of the things that you want to do, you need to find a way to make the most money possible in the hours that you are working so that you can hire people to do the things that you don't have time to get to. And every time I start to experience tiredness, a feeling of being overwhelmed, a feeling of being disengaged, I know it's time for me to hire something off of my plate. So every time I start to feel that little itch that says, I don't like what I'm doing, my life is not, it's not fulfilling, I don't enjoy this, somebody needs a job. And if you structure those jobs the right way, you make more profit. So in other words, every time I start to feel burnout, I make more profit, right? Those two things go hand in hand. Most people say, when I have the feeling of burnout, I have to get things off my plate. That means I have to make less money. And that is the wrong way to think about it. You take things off your plate, you give them to a person, you monetize that role, you make more money. Those things should go hand in hand. And that's what we help people to do here at Law Firm Mentor. We actually help you systematize your profit strategy so that you're making more profit every time that you're giving yourself more time. So you end up working less and making more at the same time.
This feels like a perfect segue. If our listeners have enjoyed our conversation, feel inspired, and want to talk to you more, where should they go to get in touch with Allison Williams and Law Firm Mentor?
So you can always find us on the web. We're at lawfirmmentor.net. There you can schedule a growth strategy call. Those are absolutely free. We will talk to you about what's going on in your business and whether or not it is an appropriate fit for you to work with us. If not, we will give you some guidance and direction on what things you can do to make your life better as a business owner. And if you want to learn more about the different things that we've talked about, the marketing, the sales, the people, the systems, the finance of law firms, then I highly recommend people listen to the Crushing Chaos with Law Firm Mentor podcast. And you can find us on all of the major platforms.
Allison, thank you so much for joining me on the show today. I want to give a special thank you to all of our listeners. Everything that we mentioned as far as the Crushing Chaos podcast, lawfirmmentor.net, and all other resources, as well as the strategy call with Allison, will be linked in the description. So if you're curious and don't want to type it in, it's down there. We hope you enjoyed this conversation. We will be back with another episode of Everything Except the Law soon. Be sure to check out previous episodes of our show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Anchor, and the Answering Legal YouTube channel. See you next time, everyone.